Welcome back. I'm Brendan, joined here with Kevin, and we are here to talk a little bit about our Snowflake migration experience. I think in order to do this justice, I have to take us back to some of the decisions that I made when we were a two-person engineering team. So I remember the moment when I first sat down at my computer after quitting my job, which is where I met Kevin, but no code, there was nothing there. We had to start somewhere. So that's, I think, the beginning. And, to start, the focus was how do we get partners on board? How do we build a product consumers like? How do I start to build out some of the algorithms that were going to be kind of this foundation behind this product we wanted to create? We chose GCP. We chose Postgres at the beginning. I think those are two kind of foundational choices that you're not really going to go back on. So we started there. And as we started to onboard partners, merchants, had consumers join, some of the, I'll call it code that I wrote from a data platform perspective was starting to run its course.
This is when you texted me, how do I write ETL and can I run a data platform out of Postgres?
That is not what I texted you because I had already picked your brain at DraftKings. But one of the first things I did do actually was write ETL out of Postgres. I spun up a separate database. I called it Analytics, which is a throwback to some of the naming conventions at DraftKings. And I wrote, ETL out of Python. I think I kind of version controlled it, threw it up on a VM and let it rip. And, for a while it worked. I was running, I think our production dashboards out of it, all of the algorithms that we were writing, ran our reconciliation, our ledger, all off of these ETLs. And at a certain point, to be honest, I think it, got a little scary for me. It's something that I was like, okay, it's time to make a change. And that's when brought in Kevin. And with Kevin came another change, which was the actual migration. So, with that context in mind, this is kind of what Kevin had when he came in to try to figure out what was going on. And Kevin, I'll let you take it away from a migration standpoint.
Yeah. So day one, it wasn't as bad as Brendan starting Prizeout because I had Brendan's mess to clean up, which I said, okay, I have these things. I have this code that's running, you have this business that you need to support, which ended up playing into the decision-making process around, well, this isn't completely greenfield. We're going to have to end up supporting what we are today and really picking apart, what are these business critical workloads that need to be migrated over and why are we doing them? The variety of data that we get and the variety of formats that we receive it in lends itself to working with a lot of unstructured data. I think being able to do that, again, very natively out of the box in Snowflake was a huge benefit, especially when dealing with some of these mission critical unpacking of JSON to populate dashboards, tables, everything that we were doing. So going back, taking a look at what we had, migrating it over, it became looking through Tableau workflows that were being used to, sort of stitch together these, multi-tenant sources that people were somehow dealing with without the ability to really create and store data over time. Funny story. I remember day 2, I think it was, and we had a list of customers that we needed to match up against one of our data sets. And I was like, oh, this is easy. Like, we'll just import it into a table. This will be a nothing. And I remember one of the analysts going, I'm just going to put this into Excel and I'm going to run this query here, and then do a VLOOKUP. And I was like, there's a better way. So, with that in mind, thinking through what could be and what ultimately I believe that we achieved, and keeping that as a guiding light as to where we want to go, became the motivating factor behind moving as quickly as possible. Again, the sales folks were, extremely responsive as far as getting our trial stood up. I think we had the contract signed within a week after doing our POC, and just really moving right away. That ability to start up that quickly without, really having to jump through hoops to get on somebody's radar, to go through a trial, to go through training, and just hit the ground running at full speed and having it embedded in the platform was a huge benefit to us.
I totally agree. I think we were walking to field day, right? When we signed that contract that was sent over. I seem to remember we were like walking through the park. Yeah. And I got to find out how terrible you are at Frisbee, which is shocking. And you were just like, hey, can you sign this contract? I think we're going to maybe touch on it in later video, but touch on it here just in case. I know one of the pieces that you mentioned, not just from approaching the migration, but why you trusted it was also some of the cost structures, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about, this was one of the bigger contracts I think we had signed at that point from a technology perspective. But you were so confident, and that gave me confidence. But you want to talk a little bit about your experience from that perspective and why you thought it would be a good contract to sign?
Yeah, I think, cost management with anything, keeping an eye on your budget, especially for, smaller size companies is key. The ability to have isolated workloads in Snowflake running at a cadence that makes sense for the business, agreeing to those SLAs and sort of pricing that out. The forecasting is pretty easy. I know we used a very similar model when we came up for renewal, which we'll get into, but the ability to do that, in understanding just the transparency that the Snowflake pricing affords is critical for us as a data organization. Again, managing costs while meeting SLAs and just finding that right balance. And one of these days, I know you're going to ask me to turn it up to 11 and we'll have real-time streaming data. But when we get to that point, we'll know what our costs are going to be and we're prepared for it.
Yeah, and it's definitely one thing I've always appreciated. I think you asked me that the other day even, but you're always just like, you pop your head in a room and you're like, you want me to turn it up? Like, we're going to go faster? And like, we're good for right now, but maybe in a second, maybe in a little bit, we'll need to do that. So I know one thing also with any data migration, and I think this always gets asked, is how do you measure success, right? How do we think about success of not just the data platform, but a migration as a whole? I think the best way at a startup a lot of times is just ask the stakeholders directly, right? Stakeholders will tell you if you listen. And I think that's probably one thing that gets, lost in the shuffle sometimes as people talk about OKRs, KPIs, right? Like, let's just talk to people. And so I know for us, I can kind of, tout Kevin and the work that he did, but when you look at the analysts, the data scientists, the business, what we were able to produce, the speed of which we could work after that, just went up across the board. I'm lucky. I get to kind of hear and listen to everything, right? And I got to just listen to the collaboration in the office or on Slack. I got to listen to people doing work that wasn't possible before, right? Queries they could not run before. I was watching them produce analytics, recommendations, right? Like to the whole business that just was not possible before we did this data migration. So for me, like that was success, right? Watching the speed, watching the output, seeing how we were able to use this data that we had been collecting better. So I don't know, Kevin, if there's anything that you would add from how did you think of your own success, right? How did you are your harshest critic, I think a lot of times. Believe you told me you don't like positive reinforcement. So, I try to manage you that way. So I don't know, how did you think of your own success and
I think
migration?
I think being able to, to see tangibly how folks were using it and sort of empowering the analysts to be able to, again, take on workloads that they otherwise not have been able to, at potentially the cost of taking down the site, was was gratifying, right? And I think being able to continue to meet the needs of the business, whereas say, hey, we would love this new data set. Perfect. We'll have it in like an hour, or, it would be cool if we could do this. And then the time to iteration and the time to delivery is frictionless.
Yeah. There's a cool little story, I think, where you did that actually with both sales data and support data, where we had our customer support team was just like, I want to dig a little bit deeper into our response times by type, right? And you just pipe the data in. We had analytics looking at it within, I think, the day.
Oh yeah.
That sound right?
Yeah.
And I think just, cultivating that type of energy throughout an organization is really awesome. I think David, our CEO, sometimes talks about it as watching your kids play, right? Watching people be successful. And I feel like sometimes you get to play God like that a little bit when it comes to access to data. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about how it's going, why we're excited to continue to use Snowflake, build on Snowflake at Prizeout, a little bit about where we're going as a company. And yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.